report enlists experts to provide Kansas farmers and ranchers with the latest information about how COVID-19 is affecting agriculture. Rural Report is a special production of Kansas Farm Bureau in partnership with KFRM's Dwayne Taves and 580 WIBW's Greg Akagi. This morning, we're joined by American Farm Bureau Federation President Zippy Duvall and Kansas Farm Bureau President Rich Feltz. And President Duvall, we last talked in mid-April, and now it's nearly the 4th of July, and the pandemic, I think it's safe to say, is by no means over. But what has the agriculture community learned so far, and what are you still trying to get a grasp of?
Well, it's really been a challenge, not just to agriculture, but all business across America. As a country, we've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and it's been a long time. We hope we get through this and get to the other side and be a stronger country afterwards. But what we've really been trying to grasp with, is, we had such an interruption in the chain going from about 50% of our purchasing of food from fast food and food service areas to all 100% of it going to the grocery store, and the food chain got interrupted. And we had a lot of farmers that lost their market, and where we were seeing milk being dumped, we were seeing crops being plowed under. And we reached out to USDA with Feeding America and asked them to put together some program so those farmers could harvest that crop and get it to people that needed it, because unemployment was going up. And so the farmers to family food boxes program came out of that and was encouraging to all sectors of our country where people needed it, farmers needed to get rid of the product. We also saw interruptions at the meat packing plant. We're looking at that real hard and want to take a deep dive look into what programs can they put together, or what reaction plans that they can have put together to try to prevent some of those interruptions. We're also investigating the high prices that some people are paying at the grocery store and how none of those prices are making it back to the farmers. So we appreciate USDA and the President doing their investigations. And we're actually at American Farm Bureau, we're creating a working group of state presidents and other people to look into what we might suggest to prevent that price differential from happening, and some of that money getting back to our farmers to help get through this. So it's been difficult on our rural hospitals, and 88% of our rural communities are underserved anyway, and it's been a strain on that. And really and truly, this pandemic has made us all realize how important broadband is, not just for health care and education, with kids working, being taught at a distance, but agriculture and the new technologies that we need, and just to keep our rural communities growing and bringing our young people back to our rural communities. So this pandemic has highlighted the need for that.
Rich, what are some Kansas-specific concerns that you're hearing from farmers and ranchers who've been working throughout the pandemic?
Well, first of all, Greg, I think everyone was very appreciative of the fact that there were more dollars that were and are flowing into the ag community. Specifically, one issue that we heard a lot about was Kansas being a major wheat state, and with the parameters that were drawn on support, you had to have a 5% decrease in price over that period, and wheat and alfalfa were not included. So that impacted a lot of people that felt like, there should have been more justification for that. Marketing of livestock, not just, as Zippy alluded to, the whole food processing chain was disrupted, but it was disrupted clear down to the cow-calf operator, knowing when to sell or not to sell, and the price disparity that was going on within that time. But also the concern of broadband as we've gone through this period and become more dependent on the use of broadband. We've kind of separated the haves and the have-not, as we've had a lot of people that haven't been able to stay up to speed the way they need to, and as we get along here, hopefully we can address that a little bit more. But broadband deficiencies was another issue.
President Duvall, the federal government has moved to put cash in producers' pockets through several programs like PPP, CFAP, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, and others. How do you feel like those programs are working, and are there any adjustments needed at this point, and should more support be considered in the future?
Sure, and of course, we got to say thank you to Congress for their efforts to help out during this pandemic. We got to say thank you to the President for signing that piece of legislation, and thank you to USDA and Secretary Perdue for providing a CFAP program that we've never seen before in the history of our country. I mean, it touched every facet of American agriculture, and of course, in a package that big, there's going to be some kinks in it. But it's been crucial to keeping our farmers' head above water after a terrible 5 or 6, 7 years of bad economy through natural disasters, a trade war, and now a pandemic. So we're very appreciative of all that we got there. The markets haven't fully recovered because we're still not through with this pandemic, and we don't really know how far it's going to reach. We have had some encouraging polling done. We've done a national poll of adults, young adults, old adults, of Democrats and Republicans. And what we've discovered is that there's a lot of support out there in the public for agriculture. 84% of the adults that were surveyed support American farmers and agriculture. So that was encouraging to us. The CFAP program affects losses up to April the 15th. And, of course, like I said, we're not through the pandemic yet. So there is going to be an additional need for help for American agriculture to help it be able to continue. That CFAP program only touched 2 commodities that on the farm, and we need to make sure we'll be able to expand that. But most importantly, what we need to do is make sure that Congress goes back and revisits Commodity Credit Corporation spending authority. That spending authority was set in 1980. It was moved to $30 billion, and with inflation added to it, we think that number should be closer to $68 billion. So we not only want it fully funded, we want them to re-examine where that number should be, and we think $68 billion would give the Secretary and USDA the flexibility to be able to react quickly to disasters and pandemics like we've experienced.
And, Rich, what are some of your thoughts as far as the programs that we have seen?
As we said earlier, very, very appreciative of the flow of funds that have come from Washington to each and every one of our states. But, and not to be overcritical, but when they throw together programs like this that they had to, in a very short period of time, involving lots of dollars, there's always areas that there's some deficiencies. And one that I think we've seen here is how they determined for agriculture the PPP and the way the program was set up, and using your Schedule F, if you didn't make money last year, you weren't going to be entitled to funding this year. As we heard time and time again, it was critical that they define dates, but that also causes some angst among producers when I sold my cattle yesterday instead of tomorrow, and whether you qualified for assistance or not. Questions on grain inventory. And Zippy, we all know that it was easy to talk about our basic fundamental commodities, but when we got into specialty crops and all the disparities we've had there and weren't included in trying to make adjustments for that. Also, the problems we've had particularly in the livestock sector with the compromised processing capacity and the backlog of livestock and how we're going to work through that. But I think it's fair to say, too, though, that, there was a lot of factors leading up to this. We had some great trade deals that are still in the works, and how to work through them. But do we need to continue in the future? I think it's obvious like we do. And as we look at projected farm income in the next couple of years, there's no question agriculture is going to need to continue to have some assistance to be the viable industry that we all want it to be.
While this crisis has underscored that agriculture is essential, it's also shown that there are some weak links in the supply chain. So what are some of the next steps there are to assess and implement any needed changes to prevent some of those issues that we saw in the food system early on in the pandemic?
Well, you're exactly right, Greg, and it did expose some deficiencies we had, but also shows how efficient of a supply system we have. It's economic based, and everything is so fine tuned from the farm gate to the retail, and the slightest disruption, we operate near capacity, so we didn't really have the ability to make up, particularly in the livestock processing area. Once we had the problem with the COVID and we started slowing these plants down, we just had a continued backlog. That's going to be a challenge because you only have so much capacity, and we were operating so close to our maximum efficiency. I think the one area, though, that we did experience an awful lot of issues with, and that was food distribution. We have a system that goes through the normal grocery process where we're all used to go to the grocery store and buy our food commodities, but we also have a big sector that is the food service system with hotels and restaurants. We didn't have the ability to convert once we slowed down that hotel and restaurant business to convert that food supply back to the traditional food supply. I think that's one of the key areas that's going to need to be addressed in the future. And it's just a logistics issue, and it can be done. But we experienced a pandemic that I don't imagine happening either.
And President Duvall, you still see some of these stories out there that packing plants still are having some issues with multiple employees, hundreds of employees in some cases that have been diagnosed with COVID-19. So that issue or that part of it, even though deemed essential, still is of a concern too.
It is, but if you step back and look at it from a nation's point of view, it's really those interruptions have been temporary and they've been regional, and it makes us question about whether or not that should be even spread farther apart across our country to prevent that, because it's all about being close to people and passing it on from person to person. So we've been reaching out to the Extension Service and USDA and all our partners to take a real deep dive look at not just that area, but all our supply chain to make sure that we make it as resilient as possible. Rich mentioned the food service / grocery store delivery system and how vulnerable we found out that was when our consumers redirected all their purchases to the grocery store. And it really is truly amazing how quickly we adjusted. I mean, even though it was difficult, we adjusted and we saw some empty shelves. But the solutions to those problems aren't really easy. And, whether or not we should be looking at a different approach that we could use in an interruption like a pandemic, maybe there is a different approach we have to look at. But our system is a just-in-time system. If you talk to a grocery store, they want it on a certain day. They don't want so much. And then all of a sudden this pandemic hit, and what they ordered last month for this month just doubled or tripled in what they really need. But as we move forward, if we make changes that can react to those situations, we've got to know that it's going to make us less efficient. And if we become less efficient, then that's going to affect a lot of things in our lives, with affordability, all the things of packing plants and their efficiency and the profitability there. So there's a lot of things that will be less efficient if we try to be able to react quicker than what we did. So it's going to take some serious look to make sure that we don't do some harm to the system as far as efficiency.
Gentlemen, as I mentioned before, we spoke back in mid-April, and I want to ask a question that I did at that time. And President Duvall, I'll start with you. What has this crisis revealed or solidified about agriculture, and how are farmers and ranchers responding?
Well, we've always talked about how important we are to the American economy and to the American people, and this pandemic has proven that. When folks started going to the grocery store and saw the empty shelves, they realized that, hey, there's a lot of things in life I can do without, but I can't do without food. And a lot of farmers, a lot of people across the country, they had plenty of food, but it might not have been exactly what they went to the store to buy. We had plenty of food to sell, but we had an interruption in the chain getting it from the farm to the consumer. I think in that survey I spoke of earlier, we also asked the general public, did they think the American agriculture was a matter of national security? And 59% of the people we surveyed said yes, that we were a matter of national security and wanted Congress to look at us that way. We also discovered how tough our farmers were. You know, we knew we were tough. We always rise to the occasion, and we continue to do that through this pandemic. I guess the other thing is farm stress and what our farmers have had to deal with over the last 5 or 6 years. And trade war was difficult, and then you throw this pandemic on top of it. Farm stress hasn't been at this level since the 80s. And Rich and I both farmed during the 80s and know how difficult that was. Thankfully, we're not totally back where we were. It was worse in the 80s, but we're heading in that direction fast, and we don't continue to get some help. But I want to say thank you to our partners that we have taken on to talk about farm stress. And those partners is the National Farmers Union. We've worked together on not just opioid abuse, but also farm stress. The Bears gave us a program that they call Farm State of Mind, and you can go to farmstateofmind.org and see some information there. It helps. It's online training that's provided free of charge for people to be able to recognize the signs of chronic stress on the farm. And Farm Credit is helping us provide that free online training. And we just really appreciate those two partners, USDA and this administration, trying to help watch after our neighbors, because we got to take care of each other so that our rural communities can thrive and our families be taken care of.
And Rich, same questions to you as well.
You know, I concur with Zippy that the ag community is very resilient. I think we did our best as the ag community to move along as well as we could. And then, like the food supply to consumers being disrupted significantly there for a period of time, the ag impact, at least in our area, was not interrupted all that much. We've gone through the critical part of farming here the last couple of months in planting our spring crops, but we got through those without any major hiccups. But I think a couple of things, though, that it did expose, though, is, as we talked about broadband before, and this is one area that I hope that we can learn from and use that. But another thing that I believe has come out of this is farmers. We've heard more discussion about the growing need for farmers and communities to provide for themselves and some marketing opportunities. And that discussion has really been ramped up. And I would assume we're going to hear more out of D.C. as some programs to assist those type of things. But I just like to close, and we've heard it in the political world a lot of times, but, you know, you never want to let a crisis go to waste. And I think we want to come out of this pandemic learning and how we can have a better and more efficient food delivery system.
That is American Farm Bureau Federation President Zippy Duvall and Kansas Farm Bureau President Rich Feltz, who join us on the latest edition of Kansas Farm Bureau's Rural Report. Thanks for joining us.